I'm going to talk about the Safeguarding Vulnerable Groups Act as a new and very weird kind of social policy, because it's obvious that there are weirdos out there, and we need some kind of policy for dealing with them, just as you need some kind of policy for dealing with murderers or fraudsters or whatever. But I guess in the past, the kind of role of social policy was to identify a problem, identify those problem individuals, find out who they are, deal with them. And what happens now is completely the opposite, which is that, rather than kind of say, okay, we have these people on our files, we'll make sure they don't get jobs working with football clubs. Instead, you do it the other way around and kind of say, we have to check every single football referee in the country. And I think that the role of social policy has fundamentally shifted from being about finding problem behavior to essentially identifying anybody who has any kind of relationship with a child and saying, we flag this as a kind of cause for concern. So if you look at the Act, for example, the thing they talk about all the time is access to children. You have a particular job, which means going into a playgroup, whatever. You have access to children, which is essentially redefining having a kind of role or a relationship as grooming, yeah, or potentially grooming. And so you say, well, who needs to be on this database? It's people with a certain relationship with children. What kind of relationship with children? Well, it means that they have to have a sufficient contact with children to have built up a relationship of trust. So basically you do something every month with children, or you do something for 3 days at a time, but all the measurements in terms of whether you should be on this database, whether the government should be watching you, all to do with what kind of degree of a relationship do you have with a child. None of it's to do with whether you've behaved weirdly or whether you have any kind of record or anything like that. The paedophile kind of exists now at the back of our minds. At the back of everybody's mind, which is weird because it's such a weird way of looking at the world. It's such a twisted kind of mentality. But yet millions of people of us now walk around with a paedophile at the back of our minds. And what does it represent? But it's our own bad faith, our own sense that we could potentially be contaminating towards others. In the name of child protection, really ordinary behaviours become unacceptable. For example, touching a child's arm, being alone in the room with a child, taking photographs, a nativity play. Parents will genuinely say, we're not taking photographs in the name of child protection. And what is that about? Paedophiles, have they got some kind of, Mary and Joseph fetish? Has any paedophile ever been caught with pictures of a child nativity play? So what we have this sense is that we're all kind of potentially contaminated as adults. And the CRB check is a kind of absolution. It's the kind of thing that declares you're clean, that you're okay. And in the past, yeah, you would get one CRB check, but then, of course, you've had one CRB check, so actually the next day you're not clean. And that's the need for repeat CRBs. So they'll be continually checked, they're okay, that they're clean. And what this really means is that any relationship that is not mediated through authority is potentially contaminated, is dirty. But the trouble is that this kind of creates a continual demand where you're always kind of thinking, what am I allowed to do? And you are always kind of looking for the third party, for the official figure, to sanctify whatever your action is. So you kind of get these big kind of front page stories on the paper, CRB scandal, and you kind of look down and you think, my God, it's some kind of murderer got through or something. And what it is a reporter got into a school and she was not checked, and she was not checked for a whole day in the school, and nobody made sure that she was checked. The reporter didn't abduct a child and lock him in a shed and no one noticed. I think the other thing is that when kids become 16, they start being CRB checked themselves. And that becomes the first thing they do as a right of adulthood, before they drive, before they vote, before in any sense they've taken on the responsibilities of adulthood. So what message does that send about what adulthood is? Adulthood is not about becoming responsible, it's about becoming a risk.
Joseph.